Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers delivered their best win of the season, 117-96, beating the Boston Celtics to improve to 24-18. They are also now 16-6 at home, the third best record at home in the Western Conference, and they remain the number 5 seed. They moved up to number 5 last night and then stayed there today. But a statement win from this group, a statement win from LeBron and AD after applying some pressure to the organization off the court over the past couple days. They deliver a big statement on it tonight, and we got a lot to touch on. We got to touch on the win. We got to touch on the ESPN report on LeBron and AD feeling like this group is still a piece or two away. AD's comments today to ESPN about feeling that like the group needs to add another center and wanting to play more power forward. And then post game, I asked JJ Redick about the reports. I asked Anthony Davis about playing more power forward and why he prefers that and just what the advantages are. So we got a lot to touch on, really more off the court than on it. But this was, again, the win of the season so far. So I want to make sure it gets its proper due. But I think at the same time, there's obviously a lot going on over the past couple of days that we do have to cover. So shout out to everybody in the chat. See you all starting to populate. So let's just get into it. But before we do, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. My brain is all over the place because this has been a crazy few hours. You had, just the anticipation for another Lakers-Celtics game. Then you have, again, AD's comments drop right after the pregame press conferences. So that's kind of the dominant storyline going into the game. Then the Lakers deliver, again, their best win of the season, the best performance of the season. And then after that, there's all the stuff post-game. So a lot going on, and I'm still unpacking all my thoughts, but I'm going to do my best to deliver them as coherently as possible. So let's just get into the overarching takeaway of tonight's game. That to me is big statement win, best win of the season. Again, I mentioned last stream that the Lakers up before the Washington game had only won one game by 20 points all season. They have now won back-to-back games by 20 plus points. And it's one thing to do it against the Wizards. As I said at the time, don't want to overreact to LA beating the worst team in the NBA. But this is arguably the best team in the NBA. They haven't been playing as well lately. It was the second night of a back-to-back. Granted, it was an LA back-to-back, so they didn't have to travel, but who knows if they went out last night or whatever they did. And they did not shoot the ball well by their standards. But even with that said, this is the defending champs. It's Lakers-Celtics, and Boston still, in my opinion, has the most talent on paper in the league with that top 7 or 8. So this was a huge win for the Lakers. And going into this game, because they now passed the Clippers, you technically remove the Clippers loss from their record against teams better than them in terms of the standings and record wise. But entering this game, they were 2-6 against teams with better records than them. Up to this point in the season. And that's kind of a fluid stat, obviously, depending on where they are in the Western Conference standings. But to beat a team like this, there's several, like the wins at the beginning of the season, the Memphis win. There are some signature key wins for the Lakers throughout this year that we can point to that I think were representative of this group's ceiling and what they could be. But tonight, to me, was like two-way ceiling on display. And I look at it like you have the 3 leading scorers, no surprise, AD, Austin, and LeBron all go for 20 plus. LeBron, I thought, especially defensively with his rebounding, set a tone. 14 rebounds, led the team. 20 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists for LeBron. Only 2 turnovers against this defense that is masterful at switching and has a bunch of like-sized players that can be disruptive. 80, 24 points, 8 rebounds, a steal, 3 blocks. I thought did a really nice job meeting Kristaps Porzingis at the rim and contesting him, challenging him. Austin, 23 points, 6 assists, 0 turnovers for Austin against one of the best defenses in the NBA, and the exact type of defense with physical, athletic, switchy wings that can give him problems. Did a really nice job. I mean, Drew Holiday and Derek White's the best defensive backcourt in basketball, and Austin, I thought, had his way tonight. And then Rui, I thought, stepped up on the glass. 10.7 rebounds, didn't have a good shooting night, but I thought made a couple timely buckets, and then did a good job on the glass. Also was defending Porzingis. Lakers went 1-5 switching, which I was a little afraid of once I saw it to start the game, but it ended up working fine. And they made some adjustments within that in terms of their fronting and how they were defending Porzingis, because he was really the guy that, like, he killed them tonight. 22 points, 9 of 16 shooting. But I thought Max looked like he belonged out there, and I've said, going back to like the Houston and Dallas games, I felt like that there's been these like playoff like atmospheres and just sort of settings that it's almost like a measuring stick or a barometer to see who looks like they belong out there and who doesn't. And I thought all 5 starters, for the most part, I mean, of course, LeBron, AD, and Austin, but I thought Rui and Max held up fine. Gabe, to me, came in 12 points, hit 4 threes. All of his threes felt very timely. 4 assists, 5 fouls. I thought was being physical, and when switched onto bigger players, was battling for post position and for rebounds. And like he was like, I like this version of like, this is one of Gabe's best games as a Laker, and really might be his best. Like, I know he's had games where he scored more or played a little bit more, but like this was the best I've seen him play against a really good team. Jackson came in and had 8 rebounds in less than 15 minutes, had a couple of timely buckets as well in the second half as Boston was trying to kind of make that run. DFS had JJ had a funny comment after the game saying that DFS's 2 shots, it looked like he had never played basketball before. And he had a rough offensive performance, but defensively had 2 steals. He had one play where he switched on to Porzingis, and Porzingis just kind of exposed the ball for like a half second, and DFS immediately swiped it away. And you saw, like, though offensively he continues to be very up and down in terms of looking sometimes lost out there and then sometimes looking like a seamless fit. Defensively, I thought he was really, really good tonight and continues to look like their best perimeter defender since being acquired. Dalton made some shots. Some of that was in garbage time, but did have that nice back cut for a dunk. I believe AD found him on that dunk. I think hit a 3 during the competitive, might have hit a couple threes during the competitive portions, finished with 3 threes overall. So really, like, this was a team win, and everyone contributed, and like the attention to detail and urgency. I think this should be the standard for this group, and if they play like this, there's going to be nights where you don't have it from an offensive perspective. Like tonight, they took care of the ball, they made their shots, they made their free throws, shot 47% overall, 43% on threes, 90% at the free throw line, only 6 turnovers. So they took care of the ball, they executed at a high level, they switched at a high level. And this to me was like, I don't want to overreact or go overboard in terms of like what this win means. At the same time, it's hard not to look at this performance and be like, just imagine if this group had that tweak or two that LeBron and AD are talking about. Imagine if they make another move for a difference maker within the rotation, and it is a Walker Kessler or a Robert Williams out there instead of a Jackson Hayes. It is a different wing or a different ball handler than some of these guys. Like I think like you see that the foundation is there, and LeBron and AD can meet the moment against good teams. We've seen them meet the moment against good teams going really throughout their entire tenure as Lakers. Whenever it's been the NBA Cup, the play-in, the playoffs, like those two always show up. I think Austin has earned himself in that, obviously not on the same level as those two, but he has largely showed up in big games and in big moments. And then I think the other guys, it's been clearly more of a mixed bag, but some of these guys have been in wars together. And I think you saw that tonight. Like the Lakers, this was as serious of a game plan, urgency, attention to detail as I can recall from a game this season from them. And it was start to finish. And there was a couple moments then in the second half where it looked like Boston was about to, it felt like they were going to go on a big run at some point and maybe cut it to like 8 points, 6 points, whatever. Never happened. And certainly again, I think there were factors going against Boston second night of a back-to-back. They did not have a good shooting performance. Aside from the Lakers defending well, like there were certainly some good looks that Boston missed. But I also think the Lakers deserve the credit for showing up, executing the game plan, and just being locked in. So to me, best win of the season. This was a statement win. And again, it's one thing to have the report come out and say, we want, we want you, the front office to make a trade. We feel like we're a piece or two away. It's another thing for AD to come out and have that drop right before the game, though obviously it wasn't recorded right before the game, and it be, okay, well, I want another center here. I don't want to be playing as much center. I want to play more power forward. And then it's another thing so that context to everything. And then you come out and back it all up and deliver this performance and beat arguably the best team in the league, the defending champs, by 20 plus points. So I just think this was again, best win of the season, like hands down. I don't really think there's anything in competition for it. And it's not just the opponent. It's not just the context. It's like, this was a very serious performance from the Lakers. And this is a group that, frankly, as we've talked about on here countless times, has not often been a serious group this season, or goes through stretches where they're serious and then stretches where they're not. I thought really from like Boston pulled their starters early in the fourth, and then, it kind of became more garbage time, and LA still had some of their guys out there for a bit until they finally cleared the bench. But like that first three and like a quarter of a quarter, 3 quarters and quarter of the fourth, like they were locked in the entire time. And I guess the flip side is like you would like them to approach every game like this, or 7 or 8 out of 10 games like this, instead of it rarely happening. But you at least saw the ceiling tonight, and I think that's encouraging moving forward. Stat of the night to me, a lot of stats we could point to. I think the 6 turnovers deserves to be highlighted because that's got to be in conversation. Off the top of my head, might be their season low, or at least in that conversation. But to me, I'm going to highlight the 3-point shooting, because what are the so we spoke with JJ yesterday at practice, and then we spoke with him pregame, and one thing that he said, and that we were saying as we were talking to him, that was just sort of assumed, was like, Boston's going to take and make more threes. The Lakers have to figure out a different way to score and create margins. Like that's a big thing what JJ is talking about, creating margins and winning the possession battle. And tonight, Boston did take more threes. They took 41. The Lakers took 35. But the Lakers made one more three. So they made more threes than Boston, and they shot a better percentage than Boston. And really, part of that was like later in the game, like for most of the game, they were pretty close in terms of actual 3-point attempts. And it kind of felt like in some ways LA beat Boston at their own game. And that is like JJ ball. That is the way JJ wants to play. And he was asked about it yesterday at practice, and basically admitted like that is the style of basketball that I prefer and that I would like us to play. It's just we don't necessarily have the personnel. But for a night at least, LA was switching. They were switching well. They were executing the game plan. They were keeping the ball in front of them for the most part. They were rebounding well, taking care of the ball, and then also launching a bunch of threes and making them. And just looking at it quickly, like Rui had 2, Max Christie had 2, Austin had 4, Gabe had 4, Dalton had 3. So like that's what 5 guys there hit at least 2 threes, and you had 3 guys hit 3 or more. So it was just like a really good, like, there aren't many. I'm sure, like, I haven't rewatched the game yet, so I'm sure if I go back, I can find some things that could have been better, could have been executed better, whatever. But for the most part, like, this was as close to a complete game as the Lakers have played. And I think them beating Boston at their own game was really emblematic of that. So let's go into takeaway number 1. And it's going to basically be a continuation of the overarching takeaway. But this game was the Lakers' ceiling, right? And again, they could have played better maybe in some regards, but for the most part, to have only have 6 turnovers, to out rebound the Celtics by 11, to get to the free throw line more, to shoot better than them from 3, like, this, again, in my opinion, was not only a statement win, but this was LeBron and AD saying, like, this is what we're still capable of, and this is a group worth investing in. And we're going to touch on the comments and the reports and all that stuff in the second takeaway. But, like, I think this was a message to the front office, to the organization, that, like, it's been a little shaky recently, and things have not been great in terms of the team's on-court performance. But this was a statement win against our bitter rivals, and you got to think about it, like, Jeannie Buss has been a Laker since her father took over the team. She has hated the Celtics for over 40 years, right? Over 45 years. So, like, I think that this was kind of a message, right? And to have this type of performance against this team on this stage during rivalry week, it felt like with 2 weeks exactly until the trade deadline, like, this was them trying to send a message. And I think the best, like, message received. We'll see ultimately where that leads, right? And still got 14 days to see how all the trade deadline stuff shakes out. But this was, like, for those who, because I do, like, today I did a national show I was a guest on, and, like, I feel like that there is this certain perception of the Lakers, and I feel like I've often come out on the more optimistic side, and, like, this is the group that we've seen flashes of, and really seen flashes of the last, like, 2.5 years since the 2023 trade deadline. So I guess, like, 2 years technically, but, like, whatever, you get the math. The math is mathing. I just think that this is a group that has a certain level of potential that really, like, when they're playing like this, again, I thought Boston, like, looked gassed at times. They were missing open shots. They could have certainly played better. And maybe if they did punch the Lakers in the mouth late second quarter, early third quarter, this game goes a completely different way, and we're having a different conversation right now. And it was like, oh, remember that first half? That was a really good first half. What happened in the second half? But that didn't happen. And again, when Boston made a couple mini runs, LA responded. So LA deserves credit for that. But I just think, like, this is the potential. Like, they have LeBron and AD can be physically overwhelming in a way that I felt like, frankly, Tatum and Brown weren't. And they're much more jump shot reliant. And it kind of comes down to, like, are they making or missing shots? And this team is so good that they often make their shots more than they miss in the sense of, like, having off shooting nights versus on shooting nights. But I just felt from a physicality perspective, from a controlling the game perspective, LeBron and AD had a bigger impact than Tatum and Brown. And I think most people would say Tatum and Brown are the better duo, or most people outside the Lakers. And I mean, just looking at it, it's like, I would lean LeBron and AD. Of course, I think Tatum's the best player of the 4 right now. I don't even know if Tatum versus AD is close for me, but if we say Tatum's the best player, I think Jaylen Brown's the 4th best player. But so I just think, like, this is the ceiling. Does this team play like this every night? No, but I think if there ends up being a slightly better supporting cast, and they get some better defenders, better rebounders, and I guess a center, because that's what AD wants. I think you could potentially see more consistency moving forward, a group that makes a little bit more sense, and a group that is rounding into form. But, 2 weeks to see, right? Then takeaway number 2 is LeBron and AD apply the pressure. And so there's the ESPN report yesterday that LeBron and AD want this group to make another move, and they feel like they're a player or two, a piece or two away from truly contending, which is something we've talked about a lot on here. I've often said it's probably more 2 pieces, but they say 1 or 2, and that there are some concerns from them of the Lakers' either ability to do it or willingness to do it in terms of going out and making that bigger move, that bigger splash. Then, right after we speak with JJ Redick and Joe Mazzulla, this clip drops from the SportsCenter interview with AD talking directly to Shams. And Shams asks him about, like, do you feel like this team is where you want it to be? Like, do you feel like you guys need another piece? And he comes out and directly says on the record, on camera, like, I think we need another center. And I feel like I'm at my best when I play at the 4. And then he references the 2019-20 title season and JaVale and Dwight and them playing the 5 and AD playing the 4. And then Shams, I think maybe there's one more clip of AD talking, and then Shams says, so you feel like you're like a piece or 2 away? And he says, yeah. And he doubles down on the report that had just come out 24 hours earlier. So the interesting thing to me is, like, this is as direct as AD has been. Like, there's been a couple times, like his opening press conference as a Laker, he referenced playing the 4 more, though that was obviously before that season, before they won the title, before, like, and remember that what they did win the title with JaVale and Dwight, but I feel like sometimes there's revisionist history of, like, the biggest moments, AD was at the 5. AD often closed those games in the playoffs and even in the regular season at the 5, with the exception of against Denver. Dwight closed against Jokic in some of those matchups, and they leaned on Dwight for Jokic specifically. But a lot, like, Houston, Portland, Miami, it was a lot of AD at the 5, LeBron at the 4, sometimes Kuzma or Keefe out there, depending on the game, the lineup, whatever. But I just want to be clear on that, because I feel like people act like it was like JaVale and Dwight at the 5 for each 24 minutes a night for all 48. And that was not the case. AD was still playing, I think it was like 20% of his minutes. So it was much lower in terms of overall percentage, but it was often in like high stakes moments, last like 5 to 7 minutes of big games, they would go to AD at the 5. But after that season, the next season they bring in Trez and Marc Gasol and ultimately Andre Drummond. So he starts to, I think it gets closer to 50-50 that season, but he's still primarily playing at the 4. Then the next season is the like it's DeAndre and Dwight. So those guys are so bad and on their last legs that they start leaning into AD playing the 5 more. The next season it's like Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, and really, like, in the Western Conference Finals run, they like stopped playing big men altogether. I think that they had add Tristan Thompson, right? But they basically stopped playing them altogether. And then last year it's Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood. So it's been a revolving door of not good backup centers, like minimum guys who are not playoff caliber rotation guys. And that's really been the last 3 years of this, has been guys who just should not be playing like serious. And I would say Jackson's like a little bit higher of that. And tonight I thought he was fine, but like realistically, I think Jackson's more of like a 3rd string center than a 2nd string center on like a serious team, and or a team with title aspirations, to be clear. Like, I think you could still be a good team, a fine team with Jackson as a backup 5. I also think you probably just want optionality where maybe there's some matchups he's good, but like we saw in the Denver series, it was kind of hard to trust him out there, especially if Jokic was out there. But even when he wasn't, it was a bit of a layup line or him fouling a lot in that series. So I thought it was interesting that AD came out and was this direct, because that has not been AD's playbook. And he directly said, again, on the record, like on camera, this is what I want. There was no like passive aggressive report or whatever. Like, yes, the day before that there was the thing that came out, but this was AD coming out and owning it and saying, we need another center. I want to play more power forward. Then he gets asked about it after the game, and I will bring you the direct quote. So he gets referenced about the talking to Shams and the team needing another big, and if he feels some sense of urgency to play for the group to play better, to show the front office it's worth investing in. And he says, I mean, we always want to have a championship mindset. We always want it to be attainable. I think our front office is obviously working. Rob is working on trying to better the team. But for us, it's about going out and playing. Whether something happens or not, we have to go out and compete with whatever's in this locker room, just like we did tonight. We're going to go on the trip, that being the Grammy trip. Not sure what's going to happen. I know he here, as in Rob, is always working on the phones and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we can't try to wait on anything. We got to go out and compete and do what we got to do to win basketball games. So he gets asked about the direct conversation with Shams. I follow up and I ask, what do you feel like is the biggest advantage for you at the 4 versus at the 5? Because I'm just curious, like from AD's perspective, we hear about him wanting to play the 4, and that's been something that's been reported before, rarely directly from him, but I just want to hear it from him. So he says on which end, that I say either end or both. So then he says, well, defensively, just bringing another big out there. We've seen it with Jackson. We're a little bit more disruptive. Offensively, it just allows me to float a little bit more. And then this is where things get interesting, because he says, I only started playing the 5 in 2021. I'd have stretches, but I was primarily a 4. So my whole career, I've been playing the 4, and we've seen how I play. I just feel a little bit more effective at the 4. I mean, playing the 5 has its advantages and disadvantages, but the front office knows that. I've told them that every year I've been here, so it's nothing new. But I just feel like personally, I'm a better player at the 4. So I thought it was like a much more insightful answer on the follow-up and kind of prodding a little bit more as to like the basketball side of this, of how he views it. So defensively, basically just said likes having another big out there, that they play a little bit bigger. We've seen that with the 2 big lineups with Jackson. Offensively, he gets to float a little bit. I take that as him just saying like being moved around, sort of like the pieces on the chessboard, rather than him posting up or being more stationary at the elbow as like the 5. Although I feel like the 4 and the 5 can be relatively interchangeable in this offense. So I don't know if there's going to be a big difference in how he's used next to the 5. It depends on who it is. But then the next part to me is I only started playing the 5 in 2021. So he acknowledges like they made that shift during the Dwight and DeAndre year to him playing more of the 5. That was also once they got Russ. It was hard to play Russ with a center, with AD. There was just poor spacing there. So they shift him more to the 5 post-Russ trade. Then my whole career I've been playing the 4. We've seen how I play, which is him kind of putting it back on us of like, you guys have seen how I play. I play better at the 4. So he feels that way. Then the final part to me is like the front office knows that. I've told them that every year I've been here. So I'm not going to try to make it more than anything he is saying, but it is interesting to me that he says the front office knows this. He's told them every year. And I think that the subtext here to some extent has to be like, and look at the guys that they've brought in, because they've, regardless of the swing, like, you know, some of those guys I was higher on than maybe the consensus, or like I liked some of those moves, but ultimately they were bringing in vet minimum centers. So like they have not prioritized bringing in another center in quite a while. And it has always been an afterthought. And so AD's coming out and saying like, I'm a 4. I want to play the 4. I've told the front office I want to play the 4. And the subtext here is he's basically saying like they've ignored his requests or not really taken them as seriously as he would have liked. And now he's at the point where he's coming out and saying it. So on some level, like I think I respect the way AD is handling this part of it, because a lot of stars would be passive aggressive about it, and maybe it would have just been the initial report and not doubling down on it or clarifying it. And he's come out and clarified, like, I think I'm better at the 4. I'm more comfortable that way. I feel I play better that way. I've told the group, the team this. They have not addressed it in a serious way. And I'm applying this pressure now over the next 2 weeks. So again, to kind of loop this to the beginning point, like I thought they came out and backed it all up, right? Like they came out, beat Boston by 20. LeBron and AD both played well. I thought that you could make a strong case that they were, I mean, really, if any, like I thought the best player from Boston was Porzingis tonight. They outplayed the other superstar duo on the other side of the floor. And we did not, LeBron was oddly not in a great mood post game. So I didn't feel comfortable asking him about the situation. It's also a little trickier because AD went on the record and did an on-camera interview. For LeBron, it's like if you ask him, well, there was a report that you want the team to make a trade and that you think they're 1 or 2 pieces away. Like that's easy to shut down and be like, well, you know, I don't say things anonymously or you know, that's not true. You know what I mean? So that he was in kind of a weird mood post game where like he was happy, but then once we started asking him questions, he kind of got a little sour. So I think no one felt comfortable asking him that. AD, obviously, he went directly to someone and shared that. So it was fair game. And I asked JJ, and I'll pull up the JJ quote because I felt we had to ask JJ, especially because this dropped in between his opening press, pregame press conference and the game. So I asked him, yesterday there was a report stating that LeBron and AD want you guys to make a trade and feel like you guys are 1 or 2 pieces away. And then before the game, there was another report that AD on the record said that he feels like you guys need another center and he feels like he's played his best basketball at the 4. In terms of the dialogue with the trade deadline, have you guys had discussions about that? And do you have any reaction to either of those reports? And JJ said, no reaction. I mean, the reality is that's not a new report. I got the job 6 months ago, so I know that. I've followed this team since I retired. Just put a date next to it. That's the report. It's not a big deal. Those guys want to win. We want to win. And again, it's a challenging environment to just go out and make trades. I feel very fortunate that we were able to execute and get someone like Dorian Finney-Smith on our team, and we'll continue to look over the next couple of weeks. So I thought JJ danced around it well, right? It's I guess a fair answer. It was putting him on the spot after a big win. I felt like it had to be asked, and I thought he handled it well. I don't really know what else he was supposed to say. He did acknowledge he's aware of that he's been aware of that this whole time. If you go back to the summer, remember he had the quote to SiriusXM about it's a good roster, it's a balanced roster. We still feel like we need a big bruising center, and then kind of walked it back a little bit at the media day press conference, and then since then has not really talked about it, but I guess this was him acknowledging he's aware of it. So next question is like, what does this all mean? I'm still trying to gather that. My sense is I think this is stuff that the group already knew. I don't think that they like blindsided the front office or the organization with this information. I think as AD said, he's been telling them this for a while. I think LeBron, it's like the worst kept secret in basketball that LeBron does not care about picks. Like the MJ meme, it's for, the MJ meme is F them kids. The LeBron reality is F them picks. And he's made it very clear throughout the years, he does not care about an 8th grader right now or a 6th grader or whatever. Like he cares about how can we build the best team possible right now and go for it right now. So I don't think any of this is a surprise. It's an interesting chess move publicly to have this come out and to apply the pressure the way that they are, because I feel like LeBron, there's a whole narrative with LeBron and applying pressure and the Lakers doing things for him. And that's another topic for another day. I disagree with a lot of it, but another topic for another day. But he had not really done this type of pressure applying. Like there's always the reports about LeBron, wants a 3rd star or LeBron wants the team to get better. But this was a more direct approach in pressure applying. Then you have AD do the direct interview and again, on the record, on camera. And that it's just interesting because we have not seen like this direct of a strategy from those two in terms of trying to apply public pressure and get the team to do something ever, to my recollection, right? And I've been covering them every year outside of the championship season. They didn't necessarily like they went after Kawhi the summer before. They didn't get him, ends up going to the Clippers. And then that next year that they want like a playmaker, they go get Schroeder. And then the next summer was the big summer of Beal, DeRozan, Westbrook, Dame. They were trying to get that third star. They end up with Westbrook. Then they want to get out of it. And then the following season, it was like, we need to make a move at the deadline. They remake the team. And then the last couple of years, like there have been reports that there's been rumors or whatever about what LeBron has wanted in terms of adding a third star, AD maybe wanting a center, but it's never been this direct. So in terms of what's next, I think there's a couple of things here. Like one, the team performance, how do they fare? They're about to go on the Grammy trip. It's about to be a 6-game trip. Technically, the 6th game is back in LA against the Clippers at the Intuit Dome, but how do they fare on the trip? They play Golden State, Charlotte, Philly, Washington, New York, and the Clippers. Do they go 4-2? Do they go 5-1? Do they go 3-3? Like, what does that look like? How does that influence things at all potentially? But really, to me, the second part or the second point I was going to make is like this just kind of feels like a bit of a standoff right now between the organization not necessarily wanting to fully invest in this group and put both picks on the table and go all in. As I've reported and as others have reported, most of the intel I've gotten has been like this is probably going to be an underwhelming deadline for the Lakers of either making a small move with a couple seconds or potentially even standing pat altogether. I do think they are more likely to make a move than not, but it sounds like it's probably going to be something smaller of a second or two, or at most one first, not both, and not really putting in all the chips on the poker table. And LeBron and AD are on the opposite end of that viewpoint in terms of put all the picks, put all the young guys. Like we don't care. Like we want you to build the best roster possible. So there's been the reporting from what the Lakers have been leaning towards and what they've wanted to do that's been out there publicly. Now LeBron and AD are responding with their own public stance and sort of pressure. So we'll see who wins. I tend to think that the organization, they're the ones ultimately making the move, and they've had their stance for whatever reason about giving up certain assets and going all in with this group. And like, I don't think that this changes it that much, but maybe it does. And maybe they end up making a bigger move or making a couple big moves, and we can directly trace it back, or at least somewhat trace it back to this whole stuff coming out in the pressure. Because now I think the one thing that is going to be interesting is like, what happens if they don't make a move or they make a small move? Like, how do LeBron and AD respond to that? And also, I think the fan base is going to be upset. Like, I haven't looked at the super chats yet. I see we got 10 already, but I'm sure you guys have your own opinions and are like in agreement with. I know the biggest need the fan base has wanted for the most part has been another big. AD just came out and added kerosene to that fire. So I'm sure the fan base is going to feel a certain way about all this. And I think ultimately it's leaning toward potentially it being a situation where they don't make a move or the move that LeBron and AD want them to make or the fan base wants. And then what happens in terms of like how LeBron and AD view that in their future with the organization. And then also how I think the fan base is going to be upset if after this happened and they beat the Celtics, they have the reports, they come out and say certain things, and then it potentially leads to not giving this a real shot. So we'll see. I will continue to report on this, and as it unfolds, it feels like this is going to be a day-by-day thing in terms of the pressure, the reporting, and all that stuff. And I will be covering it on a daily basis on here and over at The Athletic. But get your popcorn, because I think this is going to be a wild, not only the next 14 days, but whatever the fallout is, positive or negative, we will see. Third and final takeaway quickly. I'll keep this one brief. LeBron is, an all-star starter, and he was named to his record-setting 21st all-star appearance. And I had a vote this year, and I don't want to light up the chat, but I will quickly share my votes. I voted for Nikola Jokic, AD, and Wemby as the three front court guys, and Shea and Luka as the backcourt guys. I know the Luka one was a little controversial. I just feel like he was at a different level than Steph and Ant when healthy, but he has missed a bunch of games. For All-Star, I don't factor that in as much. I factor in who I think has been the best players. And for MVP, for like All NBA, I do factor in games and record and all that stuff. But for this, to me, it was like who are the three best front court players in the West this season? Who are the two best backcourt players? That was my list. In the East, basically went chalk except for one slight thing. So had Kat, Giannis, Tatum as the three front court guys, and had Donovan Mitchell. I had Cade. For me, it was really close between Cade and Jalen Brunson. From a statistical perspective, they are very close. Cade has had a much bigger impact in terms of on-off, and I think obviously as a much less talented team. And I think is frankly, in my opinion, Detroit is overachieving, and Cade has taken a huge leap. So if it was All NBA or MVP, I would have Brunson ahead. But just for All-Star, I felt like Cade deserves some love. But that was my quick voting on that. And look, LeBron, 21st All-Star appearance, starter. He deserves it. He is inevitable. The dude's going to be an All-Star for as long as he continues to want to play. And he's had an incredible year. Best player we've ever seen at the age 40. At the age of 40, best player we've ever seen in year 22. It breaks basically a record every single night for a different accolade or accomplishment. So well-deserved nod for him. I suspect AD will be, make the reserve front court. And then really the starters kind of don't matter because they're going to have three teams anyway, and they're going to split the 24 guys up into three teams. So I don't know, basically they're going to have the 10 West East starters, but then you're adding another 5 starters. I don't know how they're going to divvy that up, but there will be 5 more starters between the two teams. Again, I'm not sure how they're assigning it, but with all that said, let's get into the Q&A portion. I know I just went long. I went 40 minutes, but I had a lot to say about all this stuff that's going on. So let's get into the super chats. First one from Ali. How many total picks do the Lakers have in the upcoming years? Let's trade 29 and 31 and be competitive. We are the Lakers and need to win. Let's go. So they have 2025. They don't have. That's in Atlanta. 2026 they have. 2027 top 4 protected. They have picks 5 to 30 goes to Utah. 2028 they have. 2029 they have. 2030 and 2031. So they actually have most of their. If we're going over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the next 7 years, they have 5 of the 7 and really it's like the only pick they don't have outright entirely is 2025. And then 2027 again is top 4 protected. So they technically have 4/30ths of the pick. So in that sense, it's really like 1 in whatever percent of that pick that they don't have. The other picks they all have. So to your point, if they trade both picks, they still would have technically 4 of the next 7, and then again the extra partial pick potentially from the Utah trade. So that's reason to go for it, right? I mean, again, I continue to be on the go all in train, but we'll see what they do. BLC. The coming road trip will tell if this team is for real. Yeah, I mean, they've often, they haven't been a good road team. One thing with this is I think there are some things going in their favor now. So Golden State has kind of been a mess, and they're dealing with their injuries, and Draymond's been banged up, Kuminga's out. So those are 2 big pieces specifically for the Lakers matchup. Though I'm sure they'll get up for the game on Saturday. I believe it's an ABC, ESPN game. Then Charlotte just lost Brandon Miller for the season. They also traded away Nick Richards. So those 2 games should be easier. Philly, it's unclear who's going to be available night to night. They just, it's a mess over there. Then Washington's the worst team in the league. Lakers should beat them. So, I mean, there's a chance they could start this road trip 4-0 and it wouldn't be nuts. And then they close with the Knicks and the Clippers. So I think for me, it's I'm going to judge it more on a case by case basis of if they beat the struggling Warriors or the depleted Warriors, and the lowly Hornets and the lowly Wizards and like Philly without without Embiid, without a couple of key pieces, like those are all, good wins because they're on the road. A win is a win, but I'm not going to like really judge the team. I'm more judging the Knicks and the Clippers. Like those are the two, to me, like big important games on this trip. I would also throw in Golden State, depending on like who's available and whatnot. And then also Philly, depending on who's available. But so I guess in general, I do agree. I think the trip is shaping up nicely for the Lakers in terms of racking up some wins on it and having some easier opponents and situations. But that's a good thing. Like you take that, right? You just want to stack up wins in the West. That's really all that matters. So in general, though, especially with the Knicks and Clippers 2 games to end the trip, I think those are 2 huge games and 2 measuring sticks in terms of where this group is at. Shabugan, if there's any doubt, thank you for the super chat. If there's any doubt that this is AD's team, pretty sure going on ESPN and basically telling the front office to do something expels those. Yeah, I mean, I still think like LeBron is such a force of nature, and given his status as like a top 2 player of all time and still arguably the face of the league, if not even, just clearly the face of the league. Like he's the most famous, arguably the most famous American athlete period right now, currently playing. I still think there will always be an element of like LeBron having a certain amount of power and cachet and like to the casual fan, I think it will always still be like LeBron's team as long as he's on this roster. But to your point, like I thought AD became the team's best player clearly last season. That's continued into this season. And there are nights where LeBron has the 35-point triple-double or outscores him or has a better performance. But like in general, it's been more of AD's team. But to your point, I think we're seeing now like AD take more ownership publicly and apply that pressure. And be like, we just saw Stephen Curry say, there's not a move out there to save us, or make us contenders. Like we got to be careful with our assets and sort of like give the organization an out. And LeBron and AD are taking the opposite approach, specifically AD. So certainly an element of growth in terms of AD's leadership and how he views his current position within the organization. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Boston, 5th game in 7 nights, so don't want to get too high. Want to see what they do on the Grammy trip with Vando back. Need to be better on the road. I haven't even mentioned Vando coming back, so Vando's supposed to be coming back on Saturday, obviously. To your point, like I tried to provide that context of I didn't even know 5th game in 7 nights. That's certainly a factor. Back to back, though, to me, like there was times that they looked a bit depleted. So I didn't want to like undersell how bad Boston looked at times. But again, I think the Lakers' attention to detail and execution was just at a level that I really cannot recall them being that locked in for this amount of time. And for like over the course of a serious game against a serious opponent. So that to me was progress. Josh Harahill, thank you for the super chat. Yo, do you think AR-15 can be a 3rd best player on a championship team? Too inconsistent, in my opinion. Get Levine/Ingram and a defensive point guard. AR can't start with BI or Zach LaVine. I think Austin can be the 3rd best player on a championship team, especially with the growth he's shown over the past month as basically being like a 20-point, 8 assist, solid percentage shooting guy. I do think, I made this point before, you have to slot the right players around him. So LeBron and AD is obviously a start, but I think the other 2 spots ideally are guys like a DFS, like a Max, like a Vando, more even like a Gabe. I like those 2 together in the backcourt more so than a Rui, a Dalton, even a Jackson. Like I think you need to support him with length and athleticism and defense to make up for some of the physical limitations that he has. And I think ideally the proper slotting is still probably a number 4 overall. And if you could get a better 3rd player and move him down, not even necessarily from like the offensive pecking order, but just like in general, I think that is probably still like the best slotting of him on a championship roster. But I think if you have, like, if you slid him into the 2019-20 team and you took out, I'm not even sure which player, but let's say you took out Avery Bradley and you had Austin and you still had Danny Green and KCP and Kuzma and Caruso and Rondo and I think he would be the clear, like, this version of Austin we're seeing right now would be the clear third best player on that team, but those guys would amplify and help support his deficiencies in a way that I don't think this current roster does. So I think, can he do it is different maybe than can he do it with this group. I don't think he could do it with this current group, but that's why I also think they need to go out and make another move or two to not just support Austin, but to support LeBron and to support AD and just the guys that they're keeping. Now, as for your last couple of things, Levine and Ingram are just tough to salary match, and that's something I continue to another piece of intel I got tonight was like, it's just really hard for them to make a big swing trade like that, salary matching. And Levine is making $43 million. So that's got to be, either Austin's in the deal, which I don't think they would do. I don't think they'd put him in for BI either. But if you're saying Rui, Gabe, and Vando plus a minimum guy, that gets you to 43. But just for putting Vando in that deal, it's going to cost you a first. That's to say nothing of what the additional draft capital would be to get Levine and to also take on Rui and Gabe. So there's a chance that, like, you're potentially overpaying for Levine because of the Vando contract and because Chicago doesn't really want to take back money. So that's another thing. And then to your point, I don't like Levine and Austin as a combo. So you got to figure that out. Ingram I'm more open to, but it's another one where even mid-30s, Rui and Gabe gets you to about 28, 29, 28. And then you still got to find another like 7-8 million to match BI. And that gets a little tricky because, like, even two minimum guys doesn't get you directly there. You need like a fifth guy. And unless you're putting in Max, which I don't think that they want to do. So I think I don't want to say the ship has completely sailed on a big trade. I think De'Aaron Fox, maybe if Sacramento was open to it, like, there's a lot of ifs with it. If Sacramento was open to it and if the Lakers could get him with 2 picks, I don't even know if that's enough to get De'Aaron Fox. Maybe that's like an exception, but right now it's looking more like, I think if the Lakers add someone, it's probably someone making 30 million or less. That's a much cleaner fit with Rui, Gabe plus a minimum. So anyone in that like low 30s and above, I think is probably unrealistic to be honest. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. 80 also doubled down post game by saying he's told the front office every year he wants to play the floor. Yeah, such a farce. He needs to publicly shame the front office. So I touched on that. Ali, trade each first in both trades. DK for Kessler, then Rui, JHS, Wood for Cam Johnson. Starters, AR, Cam, LeBron, AD, Kessler, bench, Gabe, Max, DFS, Vando, Hayes. Yeah, and you could even start Max or DFS and move Kessler to the bench. And like, you have a lot of optionality there. I like both moves. I've said the most I would give up for Kessler, I think, is Dalton and a first. I would not give up 2 firsts. And then Rui, JHS, Wood, and a first for Cam Johnson. I do like, in both cases, both teams want 2 firsts for those players. So I don't know if the Lakers have to throw in a second or a swap or something to maybe get it closer to the 2 picks, but not quite at the 2 picks. But I'm working on a trade target list for next week. Kessler and Cam Johnson are my top 2 guys. I think Kessler, because of the contract, the age, helps you now and later. Cam Johnson, I think, is probably the best player realistically available for the Lakers in terms of salary. So those are my top 2 guys. And yeah, I like both of these deals. Rolla, yo, what combo do you like as a trade option better? Kessler plus Sexton, 2 firsts plus losing Rui, or better yet, Kessler, 1 first plus Bruce Brown, Toronto buyout. Is it enough to help? Is it enough or more help to contend? So a couple notes here. One, Bruce Brown, if he is bought out, he cannot sign with the Lakers. So I've talked about this because the Lakers are a first apron team. They cannot sign buyout guys who are currently making more than the non-taxpayer MLE, which is about 13 million. So Bruce Brown, Ben Simmons, Lonzo Ball, if he was bought out, all those guys are ineligible to be signed by the Lakers because of the first apron restriction. So Bruce Brown, if he was bought out, could not be signed. Now, I prefer the second trade. If you can keep a first and get Bruce Brown and maybe do 2 seconds for Bruce Brown, I would be open to that. And Bruce Brown is going to be high on my trade target list as well. He's been a guy I've said it. I am in support of in terms of the Lakers getting. Kessler and Sexton, I go back and forth with Sexton. I do think like there's an element of, I think he's worse defensively than people think. And he kind of profiles as a good defender when he's not. Like I think he's one of those guys who like plays with a certain level of energy and like kind of like, sometimes guys like move their arms or like move their feet in a certain way where it like looks like they're giving a lot of effort defensively or like really good defensively, when if you actually look at their effectiveness and like watch the film on like how they're actually defending, they're not as good. So I think one thing with Sexton is it would be a downgrade from Gabe defensively and a similar issue in terms of, I actually think Gabe can sometimes guard up a little bit better and like get into guys' legs and kind of bother them. I don't think Sexton quite has that. So he's like pretty much just a point guard defender and also average to below average as a point guard defender. So that, but then I think offensively, he is an upgrade on Gabe. And I think there are times where the Lakers offense gets a little gummed up and they could use a guy who just lets it fly. And tonight, Gabe let it fly, but that's like 1 out of every 4 or 5 games. They need a little bit more consistency from Gabe offensively. So I go back and forth with Sexton. Second one for sure. First one, if there was a way to do like not, I don't know why I feel like the questions are taking up more of my face than normal as an aside. If there was a way to not give up both firsts in that trade, I don't know if that's possible. I would assume they'd want both firsts. I'd be open to that. Both firsts for those two. I go back and forth. I guess I lean toward yes, but I don't like quite love it. Also, if there was a way to do Gabe plus minimums instead of Rui, I would prefer that as well. Laker Girl 36, I do not recall seeing your email. So maybe if you could send a follow-up. I do get a lot of emails, but I remember giving you my email. I don't recall seeing it. So if you send a follow-up, then we can schedule that podcast appearance. And thank you for the super chat. Shabugan, the info might not be new to the front office, but AD going public probably is. People have become numb to LeBron doing this stuff. AD doing it is significant. I agree. Also says if Lakers don't go for it, AD going public in this way absolutely opens the door to him asking out. It's unlikely, but it's on the board. I would agree too. I mean, I'm not saying it's trending that way, to be clear. Aggregators, please don't come for me. But I mean, it's a star applying pressure like this. It is rare in 2025. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. I agree with AD. Another example is him playing for New Orleans with Cousins. They were a dangerous duo. He knows he is not gifted enough to battle against centers like Jokic, who has dominated him, and Jokic is even more scary now. I think so. The thing with this whole thing is I still think AD might not feel that he's a 5, but in 2025, like with his size and his strength and his weight, he is a 5. And especially with the because the big thing still that I feel like was talked about for a long time and hasn't been talked about as much recently is like he was a much better shooter in 2020 than he is now, both from 3 and from long twos. Now, he was also younger, more athletic, slimmer, more explosive. So that's another part of this is like, if you go back and watch the AD highlights from 2020, he's a different player physically, both in terms of like actual body composition, because he has bulked up to play the 5, but also from like, he's getting like 2 lobs a game. He's like dunking on people in a certain way that like he just doesn't do as consistently anymore. And I just don't think is capable of doing physically anymore. But the part I really think you touch on here, and I agree with, is like they need a more physical center to play the Jokic's, to play the Zubatses, to play even the Sabonis's and have AD be more of a helper and roam, though AD has held his own against Sabonis this year. And that player's not on this roster. And it's not Trey Jemison. It's not Jackson Hayes. It's not Christian Coloco. It's not Christian Wood. So I still think they need that player, even if it's 10, 15 minutes a night. So I agree with that. I still think in general, especially with the way JJ plays, like if JJ's coming out and saying he'd do this, well, he's been playing AD at the 5. I think AD, I looked it up on Basketball Reference, has played like 97% of his minutes this season at the 5. So I don't see that changing unless it is like all in on a Kessler or like taking a bigger swing on a Miles Turner or someone like that. So I still think even if they go out and get us a Robert Williams, a Vucevic, a Valanciunas, whoever, whatever, a Pirtle, whatever center they potentially get, I still think AD is going to play at least 70% of his minutes at the 5. I don't see that shifting like to 50-50 or below 50%. I really don't see that happening. So I still think AD is a 5 and is going to be a 5, even if he doesn't want to play the 5. But I think they need that optionality that they just don't have right now against those big centers. And I think that's part of what he's hitting on. And I think that's a message that I think the front office, like they've needed that player for years now, and they have not had that player. So that's where I think they need to ideally go find that guy. Dotun, picking an 8th grader over the GOAT is blasphemy. I like that word. Thank you for the super chat. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for pointing out revisionist history with 80 at the 5. JaVale, 0 finals minutes. Dwight, 14.2 versus Miami. Def need a Jackson upgrade, but 80 at the 4 is not an answer to anything, especially if that 5 cannot space. So, I mean, you just hit on basically things I was just touching on my last answer, but I do think there's been some revisionist history as to like how important. I think JaVale and Dwight were very important in the regular season and were innings eaters and like are again, as I've made the point, like they are so much better than the version of Dwight and DeAndre in 2021, 22, Thomas Bryant, Damian Jones, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood. They're better than those guys. So I think like I say this all the time, 2 things can be true. They can have been like a little bit overrated in terms of what their actual role in production was, but they're also much better than the guys the Lakers have been rolling out. So that's where I think like, again, 2 things can be true where I do think there's some revisionist history here, but I also think those guys were better than the guys the Lakers have been playing. And that's where ultimately I think they need to get another better 5. Next one from Rolla. Assuming we have a solid center by trade deadline, we really need an answer from Michael Porter Jr. and Gordon. Do you think DFS and Vando is enough? I think either one of those guys can guard MPJ. Aaron Gordon's a different beast. You know, maybe Vando on Aaron Gordon, I guess. And DFS is like tough. I think he would battle him. It's just Aaron Gordon, like there's been times where LeBron has battled Aaron Gordon and Aaron Gordon has been able to move LeBron. And LeBron is stronger than DFS and Vando. And yes, he's older and maybe, you know, that as like the physicality has slipped a little bit for him. But Aaron Gordon's like 6'10", solid, like 250, and he could jump out the gym. So Aaron Gordon's like a physical. I mean, really, there aren't many guys that can hang with Aaron Gordon physically unless you're just like a true 5. And that's maybe it's AD and you have a real center on Jokic or you know, a center on Jokic, 80 on Gordon. Like maybe that's a way you combat it. I think DFS and Vando is still better than Rui on either player. So I thought, I said it last year when we were talking about the matchups for Lakers Nuggets. I was like, you got to slap Rui on the chest and give him like a shot of Fireball before they play the Nuggets and just be like, yo, like we need you like a Red Bull with like a Fireball shot and just go like go just wrestle Aaron Gordon for 30 minutes a night. And that did not go well. So that did not happen either, for the record, but that did not go well. So I think it's an upgrade over like Rui defending either one of those guys or even LeBron. But I still think that they probably need a more physical player for Gordon. And MPJ just makes every shot against the Lakers. There's only so much they could do. Eeg, Recall NBA Cup final game. 80 was a monster with playoff intensity, not sustainable through 82. His motor fluctuates a ton, understandably, but feel like that's why he wants a 5 to bang with other 5s. Easier on the body through 82. So this is a big point that I think a lot of people don't get. I think with LeBron being 40, year 22, most mileage in NBA history, and AD being 31, playing the 5 more, basically exclusively, you need a certain level of physicality to support those guys around them. And I think the Lakers have trended more toward the finesse skill side of it with guys like Austin and D'Lo and Rui and Schroeder. Like he certainly plays with a level of physicality, but he's 6'1", $180. So like there's only so much he can do. Even a guy like Gabe, you could argue, plays with a certain level of physicality. He's 6'1", 6'2", 190, 185, whatever he is. So like 200 if being generous. And so there's a limitation there. Like Vando is one guy who does that. I think DFS is another guy who does it. I think Max does it. He's still growing into his body. He's 21. He's the second youngest player on the team. Or I guess it's between him and JHS. Might be younger than JHS. I'm not sure. So like he's still kind of growing, and I think Max at 24 will be different than Max at 21. He's done a good job. He competes. He's done a good job fronting bigger guys. But like, I think that's kind of been my point here of if you play bigger, you go get the Walker Kessler, the Robert Williams, or you get the Cam Johnson, or you get the Bruce Brown, or you get the Lonzo Ball, and play just kind of generally bigger lineups. And like those guys are taking some of the Gabe minutes, or maybe Gabe's going out depending on the trade. And then the rest of your wings are Max, DFS, Vando, LeBron. And then you're also playing AD at the wing, kind of technically at the 4. And then AD and Walker, Kessler, whoever it is at the 5. Like that's a bigger team that is better equipped defensively to switch. They're better equipped defensively to take on certain matchups. They're better equipped to defensive rebound. And I just think that's a more serious basketball team around LeBron AD. And it's also closer to the 2020 model. So I think like LeBron and AD are no longer the same players they were in 2020 in terms of like they were younger, they were healthy. They both have had multiple injuries since then, injuries that have nagged and lingered. They're from a physicality perspective, they're like, go back and see LeBron in the finals against Miami. Like he was a different player from a physicality, athleticism perspective. And that's fine. He was 35. Now he's 40. Same thing with AD. He was 26. Now he's 31. Like these guys age and their bodies change, and injuries affect all this stuff. But so I think in the regular season, to your point, like you need a certain level of guys who are going to do the dirty work, help out, defend, rebound, and ease the load on those two, especially outside of the offense, because the Lakers are the way they're constructed do need to lean on LeBron and AD for a certain level of offense, but it's hard to ask I thought an interesting thing in the ESPN interview is like AD's the only guy averaging 25 points a game and 2 blocks a game. And that there's a reason. Most of the best shot blockers and rim protectors in the league are lower usage guys who aren't as involved offensively. Wemby obviously is insane, but he also plays more on the perimeter for whatever it's worth, even though he's technically a center. So I say all this to say, like, I think from a big picture team building perspective, I do think the Lakers need to find role players who fit around LeBron and AD and like do the things that they can't do on a nightly basis in the regular season. In the playoffs, when it's 40 minutes a night and it's every other night, and you can game plan and like be a little bit more strategic with things, like they can do it, or at least so far it looks like they can do it. But that's different than the regular season, and that's where I think LA leaning into a bigger identity and a little bit more defense with getting more defensive-minded guys and guys who can play in the playoffs defensively, because those are two different things between the regular season and the playoffs. I think that goes a long way. Okay, trying to catch up here on the super chats. I appreciate them all. Eeg, is this a complete reach, or do you think LeBron's attitude post-game was a sort of like, I'm doing my job now, do yours message to the front office? He was extra sassy after a win, which is rare. Potentially, I mean, he wasn't asked about it, so it's hard to really say other than like there were some Boston questions that and he, I think the sassiness was coming more from, at least from like the answers perspective, it was coming more from him trying not to read too much into this win and saying like, I know you guys are going to make these narratives of like, we've turned a corner or we beat the best team in the league, the defending champs, whatever. But like, it's one game. We're still building. We still need to get better. We still need to keep growing. So he was trying to kind of stay like even keeled with it, but it was a little sassy, I guess you could say. So, I mean, look, LeBron had the comments after the Clippers game, which were as direct as that can also be, of like, we're not constructed to have a margin for error. Yeah, I mean, that was pretty clear. I talked about it on here, like what that meant. And since then, it's just been like more of that. So I think you're probably right, but he wasn't asked directly about it. So it's hard to say he was like directly saying that without reading his mind. But in general, of course, we know like that's how he feels in terms of like, you know, I delivered this win. It was a statement. I beat the Celtics for you guys. That'll go get me the players I want. Dotun, away we get Kessler, Bruce Brown, and still keep Rui bench. Potential. I mean, it would probably have to be a 3-team with Utah and Toronto. And then, I mean, it's hard. It is hard to do that. Because Gabe, it's just such a big gap between Gabe and Bruce Brown in terms of like Gabe's making 11, Bruce Brown's making 23. So if you did 3 minimum guys, you could get there. Now you would just have to have those guys. So maybe you send like 2 minimum guys to Utah and a like Gabe and a minimum guy to Toronto. So Toronto saves some money. So maybe that's why they're more okay. I mean, longer term, they're adding some money in Gabe, but like for this season, they saved the money of shedding Bruce Brown's salary to like Gabe plus a minimum guy. It's about $9 million. That's not nothing. So maybe their price is a little bit lower in terms of just like it's 2 picks, 2 second-round picks. And then for Kessler and Utah, they have a little bit more flexibility with their books. So maybe they take on 2 minimum guys. I mean, maybe I think one would have to be Dalton or JHS. And then you're going to have to probably give them an extra asset for taking on some additional salary in the short term. But you give them I think JHS is expiring. Dalton's long term. If they got Dalton, obviously they'd want to keep Dalton. So kind of depends on who you put in that trade. But that's, I guess, one way. It might cost you both firsts. I think at a minimum will cost you a first and 2 seconds and maybe even a swap. But yeah, I think it's really hard to get Bruce Brown without Rui, just being straight up. Like it's hard, but I guess technically possible, especially if you stretch it out to a 3-team where you're not like sending 4 guys to Toronto, like Gabe plus 3 minimums. LeBron should take a pay cut if they go all in. He said he was going to last offseason, so maybe that happens again. Pieter K, I'm telling Jovan, Bruce/Jakob are the move gang. The price is high. It does, like, you get in Levine territory, so that's the one issue with both guys is Jakob is at 19 point something, Bruce is at 23, so that's 42. Like you're a hair under Zach LaVine. Now maybe because Jakob still has some years on his salary, you can't put Vando in that deal. And the price isn't 2 picks, because I would not give up 2 first-round picks for these two. I would give up a first and consider going as high as 2 seconds, but I would try and make it like a first and a second for them to take on some additional salary and like take on the Vando contract. But I think this one's a little tricky again, because as I said, anything above 30, it gets tough for the Lakers to match. Smokey, I'd put down both firsts on the table for DeJounte, for Rui, and Gabe. He's second behind Dyson in steals. Maybe trade JHS for DB. Hooper, he's balling, and 6'8" hands are busy. We don't need a big till Denver. I'm not sure who you mean by DB off the top of my head. DeJounte. The one thing with DeJounte is he has not been shooting the ball well. I believe he's shooting like 30% on threes. So that would be a concern for me. Maybe he shoots it better in LA. In theory, I was for the DeJounte trade last year, as long as it didn't include Austin. This would not include Austin. And I don't think the Lakers would do it for Austin. I don't know if they do both first for DeJounte, but I like the theory of DeJounte. I would like to see him either be better defensively or shoot better. I think those are two like notable concerns. I know he's second in steals, as you're saying, but like in general, his on-ball defense has not been the same the last couple of years the way it was earlier in his career. Maybe with a smaller offensive role, he can kind of get back to that. DB, again, I'm not sure who you mean. Harry Chinani, whose minutes will get most affected with Vando back? I'm guessing DK. I still think DK can add value if he gets hot for a stretch like he did today. Yeah, looking at it, I mean, tonight isn't the best example because it wasn't a normal game in terms of garbage time. I would assume he takes from multiple guys. I think you can probably slice like 1 to 2 minutes off LeBron and AD. That gets you, let's say, 3 or 4. Probably slice a couple minutes off Rui. Let's say 2 to 3. That gets you to whatever, 6 to 8. And then I would assume that it does come largely at the expense of Dalton, maybe a little bit of Jackson to LA playing smaller, which I hope AD's not listening because he's not going to like that. But I could see LA playing even smaller. Like you could argue that Vando could do some of the things that Jackson could do. Not the rim running, lob catching, but like be like a non-spacer, but then also like defensively he's better. So like there's some overlap in terms of like their general role as far as like a guy who's only really shooting around the basket. For Vando, I guess it can be spacing a little bit, though I think they're going to try and keep him around the rim. And then defensively, Vando's more versatile and just obviously much better defensively than Jackson. I could see Gabe getting his minutes slashed a little bit and then just playing a little bit bigger. Maybe Max as well. Like I could just see it being like a little bit of DFS is the one guy that I think is only going to play a little bit more. Like maybe he stays around this range for now with Vando back. But also I want to temper expectations. Like Vando is going to come back and play probably 10 minutes, 15 on the top, like high end. So it's going to be a little bit of a process of them acclimating him. Like he hasn't played in almost a year. Over the past 2 years, he's only played 29 games. So, or year and a half, he's played 29 games. So like it's been a while. So I think they're going to ease him back in. Andre Miller, to hell with the 2020 finals. We didn't even make the finals without Dwight. We don't even make the finals without Dwight against Joker that year. Revisionists forget that series. Not me. I referenced Dwight. I said Dwight was important for that series. And that, but I don't see a Dwight Howard out there. Like I do not see a big man with that defensive profile. Like Walker Kessler and Robert Williams are different types of bigs. They're Robert Williams is a little bit more like the JaVale type. Walker Kessler is more like the Rudy Gobert type. So different defensive archetypes. Otherwise, it's like Jakob Poeltl, Valanciunas, Vucevic. Like those guys are not Dwight. Like they might have a certain level of strength. They might have a certain level of rim protection. Not really Vucevic and Valanciunas, but like if you show me the Dwight Howard that's available, I will say like the 2020 Dwight, not the 2025 Dwight or whatever other backup big is on his last legs. Like if you show me the 2020 Dwight that's out there, I think the Lakers should go get that guy. But I, as of now, do not see a former defensive player of the year who still is like at the back nine of his career, but could like defend. At that point, Jokic wasn't Jokic to this level, but he was still like an all NBA, all-star. I mean, he might have won, I think he won MVP the next year, but it was the first year, but still a great player. Like they just beat the Clippers in 7. He dominated in that series and Dwight was great against him. So yeah, I mean, to your point, like I referenced Dwight earlier. I don't know if you missed that or not, but in that series specifically, but I don't see Dwight Howard out there. And again, if there is one, I'm for that, but I don't see it. Norman Maldonado, great win tonight. Special shout out to Pichu and Andri of the Spanish YouTube channel Fibre Amarilla. They are huge Laker fans and fans of yours. Shout out to them. Appreciate it. And shout out to my mom for super chatting and being up this late, almost 1 a.m. Pacific time. Smokey, thank you for the super chat. AD has 5 bigs behind him and wants another to play the 4 when he's not a 38/39% 3-point shooter. You have 2 seconds for a good draft. Draft a 7-footer. You are like technically correct, but I would just say, like, if you look at, and I'm not going to do it because we've already gone almost an hour and a half here, and there's still more super chats to get to. But I mean, like, if we're being honest, how many teams that are as good as the Lakers or better would Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, Christian Coloco, Trey Jemison play on? Like, I off the top of my head, I cannot name one. Maybe, I mean, Denver, the backup center spot's been they've kind of had their own version of that. And sometimes, I mean, they've had to basically go to Aaron Gordon playing at the 5 in past years. So maybe Denver. I mean, Dallas, they got Derek Lively out now. Like, I mean, it's not OKC. It's not Houston. It's not Memphis. It's not Boston. I think they'd play Luke Cornett. To be honest, I think they'd play Luke Cornett over Jackson Hayes. I don't think that would change. They also obviously have Al Horford. Cleveland. Milwaukee. I mean, I don't like. So my point is, you can say that, like, Lakers could have 10 bigs, but if they're all minimum guys who shouldn't be playing on like a team with championship aspirations, I don't think it's fair to kind of use that against AD. Like, I do agree with the shooting and not being a factor and not being something that it would be ideal if AD could shoot better. That would make the fit a lot easier. But I also don't think you could just say they have 5 bigs, because those bigs are like not bigs that should be playing in like the conference finals or even the conference semifinals, even arguably the first round. So that's where I will push back slightly. But to your point, like, it's been an issue, and I don't know why they haven't resolved it. They've kind of just like pretended it's not an issue, but it is. Jalen Lede, thank you for the super chat. Do you think Cam Johnson and Walker Kessler put us in title contention? I think they would have a puncher's chance, depending ultimately on, like, the biggest thing I like about Kessler is, even if it costs you Dalton, ideally it doesn't cost you Dalton, but even if it does, right now he's the 9th man, probably going to be the 10th man once Vando's back. And like, ultimately you're not losing a big part of your rotation. If it's Cam Johnson, there's a tricky thing with the salary in terms of like his it counts for Brooklyn as like 21, but then outgoing is like 25. So you gotta, like, you have to send out or something like that. It's in the mid 20s. So you got to send out, it might be 23 and 27, but you got to send out a certain amount of salary, but then Brooklyn can't really take on salary because of where they're at. So it's a little tricky in terms of making Cam Johnson work. You might need a third team to facilitate that. But if we just say, like, I mean, to me, he's a better version of Rui. Not exactly the same type of player, but he's a better shooter. Defensively has similar limitations, but I think he's a little better laterally and like quickness wise. He doesn't have the strength and physicality to defend bigger, bigs the way that Rui can. But I think in general, he's a little bit taller and longer than Rui. I think he can fit like, I don't think he's a downgrade from Rui defensively, and he's clearly more reliable, better shooter, like upgrade. So if it's really like Rui plus a minimum guy, or even 2 minimum guys, and then like JHS, you're basically getting Cam Johnson and Walker Kessler for Rui, plus the picks and assets, obviously, but like that, we're not factoring that into like what the roster looks like. And if you can do that and basically turn it into, like, again, let's just say AD, LeBron, Cam Johnson, Max, and Austin, and then your bench is Kessler, Vando, DFS. You kind of are a little shaky there at shooting guard. Maybe it's Dalton technically, if you're able to keep him, and then Gabe. Like, I like that 9 to 10 man rotation a lot, and I don't think you're quite on the OKC. I think you're capable of beating OKC, Boston, Cleveland on a given night, and maybe having a competitive series with one of those teams. I think I would still pick and clearly favor those teams. I still think there's probably a couple other teams like Denver, and maybe a couple other that, but like, I think you're right. I think you're in the mix for the second tier, and that's more than I think we can say right now about this group. And I just think they're better. Like, you're bigger. You're adding the dead eye shooter that you really have wanted around LeBron and AD. Cam Johnson's having an insane shooting season, and Walker Kessler is easily the best big man since JaVale and Dwight. And honestly, I mean, dude's averaging basically a double-double and like over 2 blocks a game. So like, he's putting up better numbers than those guys did. So like, you can make a case he's better than those guys. I'm like, he's young. He hasn't really played in the playoffs. So we got to see how he would acclimate. But I think like title contention is sort of it's sort of subjective. I would say they would have a puncher's chance, and certainly have a chance that if they're on the other side of the bracket from OKC, like let's say it's OKC 1 and Denver 4 and LA is on the 2, 7, 3, 6 side, I think they could probably beat any of the other 4 teams and let OKC and Denver fight it out for the conference finals, and then at least have like a puncher's chance against that team. And then if you win that, obviously you're in the finals, and then you see what happens. So I would say puncher's chance. I know that's not like the sexiest answer, but I'm trying to be realistic here. Like, like you could still go for it and not ultimately, like, going for it doesn't guarantee you a title. And that's, I think, ultimately the tricky thing for the Lakers is like, I think they could argue the counter argument of like, does that really move the needle? Like, how much does that actually move the needle for us? And we're not as good as OKC or Boston or Cleveland. Like, but I think you committed to LeBron and AD, and you have not dramatically improved the roster in going on 2 years now. I think it's time to either do it or not. But if you don't, that opens up a whole other conversation as to like what the rest of this era looks like, and is it just over? Michael D, loved the Dan Wojcicki episode. Absolutely cracked me up. Props to keeping him on track for over an hour. LOL. Also, connection potentially getting restored. Thank you. I got a lot of good feedback on that one. And certainly like I've noticed with like the Dan episode, the Kobe episodes, like people that I have a better rapport with because I see them basically on a daily basis. It adds a different element to the pod. Sometimes it's a little bit more unserious. And I think as I've been doing this for longer, I've kind of found my balance of like how unserious or with joke cracking and references and stuff like I'm willing to get, because I think when I first started, I was a lot more buttoned up, and that's typically how I've tended to be as just on camera and podcasting and stuff. So I think I've kind of found more of my voice and how I like to interact with guests that I have on. Connection potentially getting restored. Like he's been playing progressively better. I think this is a step in the right direction. I still would like to see a just general level of more consistency from him. He is a rookie, but we have yet to really see, like, he had that insane stretch in November, and since then it's just been, I mean, I talked about it on the grades episode, 19% on threes in December, and he's been at, entering tonight, he was in like, I think 27%. So he's not been a good shooter for almost 2 months. And for a guy that his primary NBA skill and the reason he's going to be out there is shooting, he needs to shoot better, just point blank period, if he wants to be playing. All right, still catching up here. Eeg, 3-point math problem concerned you with BB. Surprised you and Tim really like him in Brooklyn. He survived on offense, playing a strange 5 role with a ton of shooting. Hate the spacing problem he presents off ball. He really did bully D'Lo though. The 3-point shooting is my biggest concern with Bruce Brown. I actually think like physically, yes, there's a certain element of like the dude had knee surgery. There's a risk there, but I also think like it's kind of like to Dan's Vegas analogy that he made during the last episode. Like, I think for when you don't have the talent that other teams have, sometimes you have to take greater risks. And that's where I'm probably higher on guys like Bruce Brown, Lonzo Ball, and Robert Williams than others, even with their injury risks and history, because there's certainly an element of downside. And you could see it. Those guys get re-injured or they're not quite themselves and it doesn't work. But I also look at it as like them. I think sometimes you need to bet on distressed assets and guys who are maybe slightly undervalued by the market for whatever reason, but have an upside to outperform their contracts or their expectations, whatever. And I think those three guys all, like Bruce Brown, the contract is always going, like it's a 1 year deal. It's expiring. He's obviously not worth $23 million. And that was a balloon deal that Indiana signed him to. But I also think you could argue at times like Rui's not worth $17 million. And if the cost is Rui plus minimums to get Bruce Brown, second round picks, again, I don't really care. I think there's an argument to be made. He checks a lot of the boxes. I like Bruce Brown and Lonzo Ball also in part if either Gabe's in those deals or Gabe gets rerouted elsewhere. Like maybe you go get those guys and then Gabe is part of a deal for a big or something, because I think in some ways they can kind of play the Gabe role where they can be those like backcourt guard defenders, but then they also are bigger. So both guys, like Lonzo can defend 1 through 3. Bruce can defend 1 through 3, depending on who the 3 is. And I like that positional defensive versatility more than just having a guy like Gabe, who's primarily just a point guard defender and like can switch sometimes onto bigger guys. But you like, I go back to the Phoenix game. It was a layup line with them targeting Gabe and shooting over him down the stretch in that game. So the Bruce Brown thing is like, it's whack-a-mole. As JJ's talked about, as we talked about in the player grades episode, like Bruce Brown has shooting concerns. Well, if we're comparing him directly to Rui, because that's who he'd be traded for, I think Rui has some real overlap with LeBron and AD in terms of his skill set and the way he's optimally used. I also think he has a defensive floor that's pretty low and a rebounding floor that's pretty low and like a motor floor that's pretty low. And we've seen him really struggle in the playoffs in certain matchups, certain stretches. So it's like comparing those two weaknesses, I personally lean more Bruce Brown, especially with Max ascending the way he's been ascending, adding DFS, adding a healthy Vando. He's got to stay healthy, and that's a big if. But again, if we're talking like the way the Lakers hit their ceiling, I think you got to take some risks. And if you play it safe, you're going to have a certain ceiling. If you take some risks, the floor might be a little lower, but the ceiling, I think, could also be higher. So that's how I view Bruce Brown and some of the injury guys. It's not every injury, because maybe there's some selective bias on my part. Like I'm not as high on Malcolm Brogdon because of his injuries. I think his injury history is a little bit more like random and consistent, where he's just always banged up with different parts of his body. He's like Lonzo obviously had the knee stuff. Robert Williams. I mean, I like how those guys play. I think there's a physicality, there's a defensive side that like Brogdon doesn't really have. And you could argue like from a two-way balance perspective, maybe Brogdon is a superior player or can bring some more two-way balance. But like, I think Lonzo, like Chicago's been much better with him on the floor. He pushes the ball. He plays with a really good pace. He's improved a lot as a shooter. He's a good multi-positional defender. Bruce Brown has looked much more like himself more recently. He's like the box score numbers are starting to pop. He's starting to look more like the Denver Bruce Brown. And Robert Williams, that's the one that I'm actually most like nervous of if I'm the Lakers. But again, there aren't many guys who can protect the rim the way that he can. Also a really good lob threat finisher around the basket. So you can kind of get like Jackson plus rim protection, and that's an appealing player and better rebounding. Rolla, dream scenario, if Kyrie opts out and becomes a free agent, LeBron takes a pay cut, you think Lakers should go for it? Would it impact AR's dynamic with team? If you could get Kyrie, yeah, go for it, and you figure it out with AR. I think AR is adaptable enough to figure it out. So if LeBron's willing to take a pay cut to facilitate it, I say go for it. Harry Chinani, what about DeMarcus Cousins? I still think he can contribute if given a chance. I'm the wrong guy to talk about with DeMarcus Cousins because I think he's just minced meat defensively. I've said this before. I could say it now. I covered the Clippers Golden State series where DeMarcus was on the Warriors, and the Clippers game plan was find DeMarcus Cousins on the floor and bring him into a pick and roll. And that was like, he was already post Achilles. I think he was post Achilles, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure, because I think he tore his Achilles in New Orleans. Like, he was already a shell of himself physically, and that was 2019. Now think about 2025. It's 6 years later. I think, like, I want to give front offices credit. I think if DeMarcus Cousins, a former multi-time All-Star who like was a beast on the block and could also shoot threes, could be in the league, that dude would be in the league. I think the main reason is he's obviously slipped offensively, no longer the same player, but it's mainly the defense. Like, I just don't think he's got the mobility to defend in pick and rolls. And like, I'll say that I think Jonas Valanciunas is better than DeMarcus Cousins, which tells you overall and defensively, which tells you what I think of DeMarcus Cousins' defense. So I'm completely out on Cousins personally. And again, maybe they host a workout and Cousins looks good and he gets signed. But with the guys who get, who go unsigned for this long, I think that's a red flag in my opinion. Like, I don't think teams are just overlooking at DeMarcus Cousins, because the theory of DeMarcus Cousins could help a lot of teams. How many teams, like a lot of teams need backups, like Phoenix. Phoenix would love prime DeMarcus Cousins or even like post prime, but that's not the player he is anymore. Shmugan, they haven't resolved it yet because Rob doesn't value fives. It's been obvious for his whole tenure. 2 ways of minimum guys or retreads is all he goes after. I don't want to speak for him, but to your point, there's a track record and they have not invested in fives. So like, actions speak louder than words, and they have not invested in the 5 spot. Andre Miller, every legit title contender has a huge front court. Good point. Go back to 2020, even go back to 2023. Again, they didn't really play centers in 2023, but it was Vando, Rui, LeBron, AD, and always having like basically 3 guys 6'8", 6'9", and above at all times. Not as much small ball. So they're like, some of these teams like OKC, Boston, even Cleveland, I think have small ball looks, but in general, Porzingis is 7'3", Tatum's listed at 6'10", Brown's 6'8". Look at Cleveland, Allen's 7 foot, Mobley's 6'10", 6'11", Okoro is 6'7". OKC are potentially going to be starting Chet and Hartenstein, 2 7-footers, and then Jalen Williams, who's what, like 6'7", 6'8", or maybe 6'6", somewhere in there at like the 3. Yeah, you're right. I mean, most teams have a second guy at least 6'10", or most of the like elite teams have at least 2 guys 6'10" and above in their starting lineup. Lakers are the exception. K. Norris, LAL Prime. Vooch, 80s, played with a spacing big in New Orleans. I'm open to Vooch. I mean, Vooch would be Rui plus a minimum. I don't think I'd give up a first for him. If you could get him for 2 seconds, I'd entertain it. I think it's kind of a clean swap between Rui and Vooch. The defense is the defense. It's not good. You hope that within LA's system and playing next to AD, you can kind of mask it and at least play like 2 7-footers together and have that give you a certain level of size, defensive rebounding, etc. Offensively, I love it. He can space. He's having a career year shooting wise. Pick and pop big. You can play. Like, I think the offensive fit is pretty seamless and in some ways, like some similarities to Rui. And I think he could pick and pop, also space. Like, he's obviously not going to attack closeouts the way Rui can. And you probably want to occasionally run a post up for him. But defensively, certainly like concerns, and I don't love the contract, but if it appeases AD and LeBron, I don't think it's like you're taking a big step back in terms of going like Rui to Vooch. I mean, I think Vooch is a better player just in terms of like what fits the roster more. Ideally, I've said it and I still maintain I want a defensive big if I'm the Lakers. That's where I prioritize Kessler, Williams, and even to a lesser extent, Jakob Poeltl. But if you can get Vooch for not a first round pick and AD and LeBron are on board with it, and like they view that as like a more win now move, I think there are worse win now moves to be honest. All right. I think I caught up finally with the super chats. I see we are deep in the chat. I do still have to write a bit tonight. So I will be ending shortly, but I want to get to some of the non-super chats that I wasn't able to get. So let's see if you guys have questions in the chat. Please let me know. Tosh Bop, would you trade for Kelly Olynyk with Bruce Brown? So some guys I keep forgetting how much money they make. Kelly Olynyk is one of them. He is making this year 12.8. So the one issue with this is that again you're bumping up. I said earlier it's probably got to be 30 million or less roughly. Olynyk and Brown get you to 36. So it's like in that range you're in Ingram range, you're in De'Aaron Fox range. Like might as well try to go get those guys, right? He has one more year. Olynyk has one more year. So, I mean, because you probably try and do like Gabe, Rui, and 3 minimums. Olynyk, I'm not as high on as some and some people I respect, just because I think he's fine in like a team defense context, but he's not a post defender. He's not a rim protector. He's an okay rebounder. Obviously, offensively, I think he's a great fit. Floor spacer, like can get hot, can change a game, can change a quarter with his shooting. Would fit really well next to AD, LeBron, etc. But I still think like defensive big. Like honestly, in this case, I'd rather just go get Vooch if it's between like these two paths. But really, it just comes down to like it's hard to match salary. And if you're doing like Rui and Gabe plus 3 minimum guys for these two, you're running into some issues with Toronto in terms of like how many contracts they could take back and then potentially asking for more. This is a tough one. Kane Carter, rank the top 5 quintessential white boys who played with LeBron. So what are we ranking them on? Are we ranking them on like aura? Are we ranking them on like how good they were? Off the top of my head, if we're saying how good they were, I would say Kevin Love 1. King Carter says rank them on skill / swag. Okay, so we're combining aura plus. I mean, I would still say Kevin Love 1, Austin 2. Do we count like? Are we counting like Zydrunas Ilgauskas as a big white guy? I see in the chat Mike Miller, Caruso 2. Okay, so Tommy Gold, I think I agree with this. He says Kevin Love, Mike Miller, Kyle Korver, Caruso, Reeves. I think you could throw in Dellavedova, Mozgov. I see. Yeah, Delhi, Birdman. Birdman's a really good one. I guess he's played with some cold white guys. I mean, some of these guys are very similar in terms of like skill, like or like how I would rank them. I think I'd go top 5. Not really. I'm just gonna do top 5. I'm not gonna overthink the ranking in terms of like where I put them, but I would probably go Love, Reeves, Caruso, Miller. I'm gonna throw Birdman as the fifth guy. I was a big Birdman fan. Bolder man than me in terms of getting the neck tattoo. I got some arm tattoos, but not neck. So I see Mozgov. I mean Zerbiak. Yeah, I mean there's some good some good options. Okay. Justine Severo says, "Yo, Jovan, I might swerve, bend that corner." Whoa, that song is too addicting. Dark Galaxy says top 5 for Lakers. Are we still doing white guys or top 5 Laker teammates for LeBron? Leo Potente says, we talk about swag, Birdman is number 1. Come on. I mean, yeah, if we're talking, but it was plus skill. So I think there's a skill gap between like him and Kevin Love or Austin or Caruso even. Dark Galaxy says top 5 for Lakers. Okay, so if we're going top 5 Lakers for LeBron, I mean, AD is number 1. I would go... I think Austin, KCP. I think there's, I guess, D'Lo, and I'm not sure who number 5 is. I mean, I guess we could go. Are we going baby Lakers like Bi, Kuz? I mean, AC like the Rondo. I mean, could go Dwight. I'm not going Russ. I'm sorry. Russ is not getting picked. That is my rule. Sorry to Kane Carter. Bloodhound, 801 people and only 187 likes. Come on, people. Yes, let's get those likes up. I did say D'Lo. Oh, seeing Carmelo. Okay, now I'm getting some. I usually get criticized for my D'Lo takes, and now I'm getting criticized for praising him. Schmidt K says AD, Kuz, Caruso, AR, KCP. I could get behind that. Dark Galaxy says white boys too. So LeBron, what? I mean, AR, Caruso, Dalton. He played with Zoo, right? The first year. He did. Zoo, and then who is the 5th guy? Should we go like Cole Swider or Cole Swider, Jay Huff? I hope there's not someone I'm missing. That's yeah. This one's a little tougher. Andre Miller, Jovan, has Miles Turner declined a little bit. He's had like a bit of an off year, but he's still like, I want to say he's 28 still. So he's technically in the prime of his career. Oh, okay. Dark Galaxy says the Lakers history. Well, Jerry West, of course. I'm gonna throw Vladi in there just because he's my Serbian Barate. Gail Goodrich. George Mikan. Come on, George Mikan, legend. Pat Riley with the stash. Kurt Rambis. Mark Madsen. Slava Medvedenko. Powell. It's a long list. Matt Ryan, I see. Bouchon. Hey, Jovan, any Seawood update yet? No Seawood update. Based on AD's comments, I don't think he views Seawood as the solve here. The Machine, Sasha, yes. Steve Blake. I did mention Powell, Mark Madsen, Farmar. Svi. Shout out to Svi. Fang Charlie, let me ask you, is your wife getting pissed off at the time you're spending with us? No. She does not like the mustache idea. I was growing out a little bit, and then I shaved it pregame, but it's still a little bit here for my standards, and she doesn't want me to shave my head. So those two suggestions from you guys got vetoed. Okay, Norris, do you think AD is getting fed up with Rob not getting a serviceable backup for him? Haven't heard him be this vocal since wanting out of New Orleans. I think fed up might be like strong, because I think like, remember Giannis had those comments, I want to say it was last season, where he almost like implied, maybe it was the beginning of this season, I don't quite remember, but he had the comments where he almost like implied like, if we don't get better, I might ask out, or I might be open to leaving. Like I think AD didn't go that far. I think that would be more of like a, I think it was obviously like a question posed to him. He gave his piece. Then we asked him again. He doubled down. But like, I don't know if fed up might be a little strong, but I think he is clearly like wants it to be addressed. So there's maybe like a little bit of a gray area between those two things. But I do think some of the comments he made in terms of like, I've been asking for this for years, they know about this, like that was a sort of way of calling it out. So I guess maybe fed up is appropriate. But I think fed up implies like there's going to be some consequence if it doesn't happen. And I don't know that we're there yet, but it is something I'm going to continue to monitor and report on in the next couple of weeks. Adam Hurley with some positivity here. I'm feeling good about 24 and 18 and getting Vano back, as you should. I think things are, this is the best it's been, I would say. I mean, looking at the schedule, last time they were 6 games above 500 was January 3rd. So that was 3 weeks ago exactly. And then they had gone through that kind of, I mean, they had that rougher stretch earlier. So like before that, earlier in the season, the last time they were 6 games above 500 was 10-4. So 10-4, 20-14, now 24 and 18. So this is just the third time this season they've been 6 games above 500. Every time that has happened, they have lost the next game. So we'll see. They've actually gone on a losing streak or a lot. Yeah. Yeah. They've lost 3 games in a row. Exactly. So we'll see what happens with Golden State, Charlotte, and Philly. The Lakers, when they go 6 games above 500, tend to go on a losing streak. Barath Ram, Jovan, is Claxton still an option? If he was, I think we would have been in he would have been in the DFS trade, but it would be a good addition to this team and would be a great fit. I think there's a chance he's available. I'm guessing my read is he's probably a guy you have to, like, they're going to have a high price to get him. So I don't know if a first would be enough. I think they probably want more, and I don't know if LA would go that high. Classy K, dear Jovan, you're my favorite Lakers media. Thank you. Are there any South Bay players you have an eye on? Quincy is the main guy. I think Bronny too, just in terms of his development. And then, of course, the two-way guys, Koloko, Traore, and Jemison. Otherwise, I'm not... I think if there was a guy on South Bay that was ready to be called up or contribute to this team, I think we would know by now. I don't think there's anyone quite at that level. I think there are some guys longer term that could be interesting, but it's primarily like the main guy, like JHS, I guess I would throw in there too, just seeing how he developed. Like, really, if JHS could be like what the Lakers wanted him to be, even like 70% of that, it would be a huge perk to them in terms of being able to move Gabe, potentially have JHS as a backup point guard, and then being able to fill Gabe's salary slot with something else. But alas, we are not in that universe. Tally Khalifa, Jovan, do you think it's worth it to trade away our first round picks for Kessler, maybe get a less valuable first round pick in return, a swap essentially? I'd be open to that. I think that's better than giving up 2 firsts just on protected, right? So, yeah. Lou says, "You still live?" Yeah, I'm still here. Well, I went 40 minutes before I went to the Q&A, so I felt like Mixelflex, does Dan have a YouTube channel? Need a sponsor? He does not. And I'm always open to sponsor, unless you're talking about Dan, in which case he does not. Oh, Ken Carter with a question. Jovan would say better intro Over My Dead Body or Tuscan Leather. So I think from a technical perspective, it's Tuscan Leather for like me and which song I like better and which song gets me more my feels. I would say Over My Dead Body. Jake from State Farm with the statement I agree with the most that on this entire stream so far. Just don't wear those city editions. Lakers cannot. They're 1-8 in the city editions. They need to never wear those again. Dark Galaxy says Coloco over Hayes. I think Jackson's been playing a little better, but I think Coloco's better defensively, and that's ultimately like I value defense and rebounding more from the center spot. Barath Ram or Barath Ram. Jovan, your top 5 sneakers, period. I'm going to be a little cliche here because I'm a big Jordan guy. And I would probably say, like, so I'm not like a big hype beast. Like I did own some Yeezy. Like I went through a little bit of a phase of that, of like off-white Prestos, Yeezys, whatever. But for the most part, I've just kind of, I sold some of that stuff, and like I've stayed true more to just old school Jordans. Like that's kind of my uniform / identity. So I would say like 1s, 3s, 4s, 11s. And then I actually don't know if I have a 5th that like I would put in the top 5. If I had to put a 5th shoe in the top 5, I would go. That's a tough one. A little cliche. I'll go Nike Dunk just for like. No. Sorry. Air Force One. Air Force One. Top 5. You go all white. I do like the white with the black check, but Air Force One. Like Air Force One is the sneaker I've worn the most in my life and had the most of. Like right now, I probably have like 4 or 5 pairs of Air Force Ones. So I would say Air Force One, and then Jordan 1, 3, 4, and 11 are my top 5, period. As you can see, I have some bias towards Nike and Jordan. Leon G, yo, big man Buha, nice win. Thank you for I'll take the compliment there. Do you think other teams' best players starting to get cold sweats when they see AD, Vando, DFS, and Max across the court? Not yet, because Vando's not out there yet, but they should. That's a pretty impressive 4-man combination defensively. You could throw Austin, LeBron, Gabe, Jackson. I would not put with that lineup, but you got some options in terms of the 5th guy, and it looks pretty good. Jake from State Farm, Quincy is rejoined South Bay. L.A. still owe you an email. I've not forgotten it. I'll hit you tomorrow. Jovan, does 80s comments change your percentages for a big swing, half measure, or do nothing? I think it changes my percentage in terms of, I think half measure is even more likely. I think I'd said 15% big swing, 35% do nothing, and maybe then 50% half measure. I think maybe that increases to like 60% half measure, 25% do nothing, and then 15% big swing. So I don't think this really changes them potentially doing a big swing. I think it's more likely they make a move and that's probably a half measure, or maybe 2 half measure moves that like they try to package as a big move, but is not. Bang Charlie, we're gonna get a fan show with you soon, brate. Yes. So I actually good for the 800 of you watching. Thank you. I will be going live. So I just hit 20K a few days ago, and I appreciate you all for subscribing. If you've not subscribed and you're watching right now, I hope you consider subscribing. But I will be doing, I hadn't decided what time yet because I wanted to kind of see how I felt in the morning. But I was leaning towards my flight's at 10 p.m. to San Francisco. So probably, I was thinking probably 3 or 4. And then I'll probably just go an hour because I got a lot of errands and packing and laundry and stuff to do before I leave for 11 days or whatever the trip is. But I think I'm going to do an hour tomorrow, probably at 3. I'm leaning toward 3 or 4. We'll see. But I'll post a community note in the morning letting you guys know, and then I'll schedule it out and you guys will see. But tentatively 3 or 4, that's the best time that works with my schedule. Okay. I think Justine Severo says subscriber from day one. I appreciate you. J9U, congrats on reaching 20K. I appreciate you. Fang Charlie, 3 to 4 p.m. 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. Anytime I say a time, I'm typically talking Pacific. I should clarify, but that's my tentatively 3, but I might do 4. We'll see. Leon G, you know what they say, 2 half measures equals a full measure. Technically, but there's a difference in the NBA. I like this one from Dark Galaxy. Y'all remember the play when LeBron inbounded the ball to Hayes with 2 seconds left? The Lakers had back-to-back. If we want to like nitpick a little bit, they had back-to-back possessions where Jackson Hayes takes like the final buzzer-beating shot and misses badly on both of them. Not quite sure what they were doing offensively in those 2 possessions. Young Lito says, with you being 6'5" and traveling on the plane a lot, do people ask if you're an NBA player? I have been asked before. I typically, the more typical question is, do you play basketball? So I don't know if they, just being straight up, I don't know if they assume I'm a basketball player because I'm white. You know, they probably not, but or assume I'm an NBA player because I'm white. But I think they assume I'm like a college player or overseas or something. But I do get asked if you play basketball a lot. Harry Chinani says, great post-game show. Please get some rest. Yes, Ryan Mitchell, thank you. Well, thank you. Do you get to fly with the team? I do not. Only people who work directly for the team or work for Spectrum get to fly on the plane. All of us common folk get to travel commercial. Upside is I get all my miles, and in the summer I get to go on a vacation that is sometimes paid entirely for with my airline miles and hotel points. Eman Mundo, big fan of you, brother, with a bunch of emojis from the Philippines. Thank you. I appreciate you. Appreciate you watching at whatever time it is over there. Appreciate you. I was looking at Jake from State Farm said 2 half measures equals a half measure. Exactly. L.A. Will you post in the community once you lock down the time? Yes. Tentatively 3, but might be 4. J Note said, WTF, you're 6'5". Yes, I'm 6'5". I'm honestly 6. If I wear Air Force Ones, I'm 6'6". But yeah, I don't know if you guys see me in the background of some of the scrums, like you can kind of see how tall I am. Okay. I'm going to wrap here before I get sucked into the vortex that is this amazing chat. I appreciate you all for watching and listening. We have not gone 2 hours in a while, especially on a game night, especially on a night of writing, but here we are. It was that type of win, that type of night. A lot of positives with a statement win in LA, solidifying, I can barely talk now, solidifying themselves as number 5 seed and continuing to have some momentum, back-to-back 20-point wins, beat the Celtics. Always a great time in Lakerland when they beat the Celtics. But we now have this backdrop of what are they going to do over the next 2 weeks. LeBron and AD have made it known what they want, and we will see what the front office and organization decide to do with that public information, the public pressure. So as I said earlier, get your popcorn. I think it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks, but that'll do it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you've not subscribed yet, join the 20,000 plus that are currently subscribed. Make sure you turn on channel notifications so you don't miss when I go live or when I post a new episode of Buha's Block. Make sure you like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back later today with a 1-hour Q&A celebrating 20,000 subscribers. Again, I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you very soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.